Well, good morning. As you take a seat, I just want to say how glad we're here, how glad we are that you're here with us for Vision Sunday. Now, I'm going to tell the story of us getting started. Now, there's like a long version to this story, a medium version, and a short version. I'm going to aim for the shorter version today, but we'll see what we get. The reason I'm aiming, though, for the shorter version is you're going to also be part of reflecting and looking back in just a little bit. But before we go to our first ever Sunday at the community center, we have to go backwards just a little bit because it's important for the conversation today. In November of 2019, Mike and I spent 2 days at Exponential in Naperville, Illinois. And we went to this conference kind of saying like, okay, God, is church planting next? Is that our next step? And there was a moment on the first day of that where we felt like, okay, it is abundantly clear these are our next steps. And so it has been from that first couple of days in November of 2019 that Mike and I have been praying and dreaming of what 1128 in this community could look like. And so then we fast forward a little bit, like past COVID shutdown, and we started a residency at Lake Point. Brian, the pastor at Lake Point, helped Mike and I put those dreams on paper, right? He helped us kind of think through them. We spent a year there. And then as we moved closer to our original, or like our first Sunday, we started having these meetings in the park. And we started meeting with people, gathering in parks, and it was through like this time that we really saw God providing for these dreams, like in just really big ways, whether it was church partners, whether it was like people on the outside saying, yeah, we're not going to be a part of the community, but we want to help you right now. And then it was also people that were saying, yeah, we want to be in this community. We want to help build this community. And God provided in these numerous ways. And then finally, we launched on October 31st of 2021 in the community center. And I just remember standing there thinking like, oh my goodness, I can't believe we're here. Like, I can't believe we made it. Like, I can't believe with all the praying and the preparing and all these ways that we got to watch God provide, like, oh, we're here. And Mike and I remember us saying to each other, okay, but like, we might feel like we're here, but really this is just the beginning. And that was part of the reason that we planned our first series called Are We There Yet? And it was all about the Israelites who flee slavery, and then they're in the wilderness. Now, we're not necessarily in the wilderness, but they flee slavery and they could feel like we're here, but instead their journey was really just beginning. And so we really looked at it as, okay, our journey is really just beginning. And, you know, through all of the planning and the preparing and the praying, and there's been so many exciting things that have happened over the past 3 years. We've gotten to celebrate Christmases together, Easters together. We had worship nights. There's been many people in small groups. We've served at Booth Manor and more recently at City on a Hill. We have had times where we've had a lot of fun together. We've walked in 4th of July parades, handed out water bottles. There have been a lot of fun and exciting moments, and this part was not necessarily planned, but people might not know this, but the amount of like just thinking and praying that especially Mike does to make all of these happen is just something that is truly encouraging to me, because it's not like things have just been like, oh, let's try this or let's do this. Like, it's been very, very intentional. And through this intentionality, we've also seen people find safe spaces to ask questions, to learn like what it might look like for them to have a relationship with Jesus. We've seen people be baptized. We've seen people say yes to next steps. And those next steps have looked a million different ways. But we've seen out of those next steps, people choosing to lead small groups, people saying, yes, I want to serve. I want to join a team. I want to be more consistent on a Sunday. I want to, many things. And it's been really, really exciting and encouraging to also watch a community form that starts to like take care of each other. Even just this morning, somebody from the community brought somebody else a coffee because they knew they hadn't slept the night before. Like, those little things matter. Seeing people matter. Taking care of each other matters. And there are some Sundays where I am running around. I will be honest. There are some Sundays where I don't stop. But the Sundays that I am able to come into the back of the little theater in the high school, without fail, I will usually tear up. Because it is just so overwhelming. And it's joy. Like, it's not a bad thing, but it's so overwhelming to see this thing that we had dreamed about since November of 2019, like, actually in front of me. Like, it's so, like, I cannot believe it's right here. And so what we wanted to do, whether you've been here a month, whether you've been here since the first summer, even before we had our first launch, we want to take time just to remember, to reflect, to celebrate. So that's part of the reason you're at tables. I want you to turn and talk in just a second and tell somebody what you, okay, you guys, they looked at each other. Okay, they're not happy about talking to each other, apparently. I want you to tell somebody what you remember, what's been a highlight, what's been something about 1128 that is a great thing in your story and in your life. And if you all finish during the time, that's okay. Also spend some time asking questions, getting to know you. But I'm going to give you about 8 minutes to talk, and then we'll come back. There have been so many exciting things, and Mike and I truly love to celebrate and hear what others are excited about too. And I will be honest that on like our hardest days, it's those like individual stories or individual things that really are like that help push us through. There's been a lot to celebrate over 3 years. And there have also been some hard moments. And this summer and fall was a pretty hard season, I would say, for Mike and I, where we just felt exhausted, where we felt like tapped out, like, okay, like I just don't know how we can keep going. And not necessarily like in like life, but like just like with like 1128 and just how much we were carrying. And it was through like prayer and just wisdom of others that we were really able to kind of put our finger on some of like the pain points and like why we were feeling the way that we were feeling. And then it really, honestly, it led to these beautiful conversations and these beautiful moments out of it where then it almost felt like we were dreaming again. Like it almost felt like we were back at the beginning and kind of dreaming and looking ahead to the next 3 years in this like really exciting way. And so some of those conversations we had were with Lucia. And so I'm going to invite Lucia up to share kind of about this big picture, what we've been talking about, Mike and I and the board and our volunteer staff and with Lucia, and just kind of the culture and the things we're excited about.
I don't know if I feel comfortable with this man, with my husband sitting here watching me. No, just kidding, Nick. All right, so my name is Lucia. I'm the CEO and founder of ALSA, and you will see my family. We all don't look alike. There's my husband Nick, and you've seen my kids running around also in this church. So, when not sure who's going to be we got it? All right. So following up on what Colleen said, right? There are going to be times that we all will be in an organization and will feel like, is this what it's supposed to feel like, right? We have those moments that was like, is this what's supposed to feel like? So back in the last summer, Mike and I were having a similar conversation, and we were talking about volunteering, right? And I asked him a question. I said, what if you and Colleen weren't here? What would happen with the running of the church? And that kind of left us with this question of like, oh my gosh, what would happen, right? So it really was that fundamental question that comes from a servant leader. If I am gone, would this continue to run? And that's what Jesus did, right? He basically said, I'm going to be gone and y'all going to be fine. And over 2,000 years, we'll be, we have been fine. So as a servant leader and as a servant leadership at the church, we have to ask that question. What would happen if our leaders are gone? So once we go back to that fundamental question, I said, well, let's take a look at do we even know what each other does, right? So a funny picture, and I don't know if any of you are in the IT department. Okay, so we all have seen this, especially during COVID, like the back of my computer just looked like this. I had no idea what each wire did, but it was connected to something, and something made something work. So it kind of felt like that. The operational team, the volunteers team, we all knew that we all kind of came together, but how is it that it even impacted somebody else's job, right? So we went into this, in this visual, and I showed this visual that, we'll go to the next, please. Okay, so if we look at this, we all have seen these little birds, especially in the fall, right? When they are like going away to the south or sticking around. There's no leader, right? There's not one bird that is leading the entire flock, but all the birds know where to go. It's a harmony. It's an orderly and orchestrated process that we don't know how it all happens unless you're like a bird expert, which I am not. But how would it look like if our church ran like that? Kind of like that, those flock of birds that just kind of goes. Everybody has a role. Everybody knows what each other does. There's not one person who is being left behind, and that if there's one bird missing, somebody else is going to pick it up. So obviously I came with an operational, problem, like let's solve this operational problem perspective, which was really good because we came together as we have a pastoral team, a pastoral leadership team that wants the church to run, and I'm kind of viewing it not as a church, but how is it that we can make sure that we are coming from a servant leader perspective and have the church continue. So what we did here, there you go. So I am here to introduce the Connections team, the 1128 Connections team. We're no longer volunteers. Volunteer means that you're going to sell the chocolate bars at the door, and you're going to get $1, and you're going to give somebody the $20. When we are committed to a church, you all have a role in it. And our role in here is not just to volunteer. But if we go to the next slide, we actually had to look at the Connections team and change how we viewed it from an aspiration perspective and a structure perspective. So that's what we did. We said, well, what is the purpose of a Connections team? Our purpose, starting today, it is to enable an environment that is welcoming, harmonious, and promotes healing. It fosters moments of connection and reflection so that every individual who walks through our door enters can experience the presence of Jesus. So each one of the so we're not going to call it the volunteer team, each person who is part of the connections team, we all are going to be flying, kind of like that bird flock, with the same goal in mind. I am going to enable an environment, whether I'm singing, whether I'm speaking, whether I'm behind the scenes. My goal is so that everybody who walks through that door can experience that moment with Jesus. Does that mean that I have to smile? Does that mean that I need to know what somebody else is going to do at the prompter? It means a lot. It means that we all will have that role. So if we go to the next one, our structure, and you will hear this a little bit more, our structure basically breaks up in 3 teams. Number 1 is the engagement team. So those are the people that you meet when you come in, right? Is the greeting team, is the coffee team, is all the people that you are meeting, and it's a one-to-many, right? Visual people, the people that are just so welcoming, and I can see them even sitting in our group in here. The second team is the support team. So many people are coming here at 6:30, not here, but at our building, 6:30 in the morning to start setting it up. There's so much that goes on that we don't see it. That is our support team. And we want to make sure that they are visible in the sense that sometimes they need additional help. If one of them gets sick that day, then it just means that it may not happen. So we went through all these tasks and all these activities, and then we also said, hey, there's a shepherd team. There's a shepherd team that, and I didn't put Shepherd Hills, by the way, which I'm very proud of because I was making that mistake a lot. The shepherd team is the one that is taking care of each one of us. The ones that is making sure that we get the pizzas, or making sure that we're getting that phone call, making sure that we're getting that meal, making sure that, hey, how can I pray for you? That is the team that is reaching out and meeting you where you're at, so you can also find that moment of Jesus. So what happens after this? So at the beginning of my talk here, I said, is this supposed, like the fundamental question, right? Is this what church is supposed to feel like? Right? Coming here, I gotta volunteer. I gotta do the greeting, or I gotta do the coffee. I'm gonna sleep another extra 5 minutes. Not understanding what everybody really does behind the scenes. To transforming it into not necessarily a volunteer team, but a team that is building connections. So we want to make sure that from now on, and if you are willing to be part of these connection teams, that you're not thinking of it as a task, but whatever you're doing, it carries a purpose. Because what you are going to do, whether it's saying hello to somebody in the hallway, or helping to serve coffee, that you now have that purpose on building that church. So it doesn't take one person to run it all, or 2 people to run it all, but it takes all of us to create it. So you will be seeing more material. I'm going to pass this to Mike now. But you'll see more material in terms of like, hey, if you want to sign up, if you're going to serve. And I heavily encourage you that if you feel like you want to be part of the connections team, that you, in whatever little role, you can serve as that person in that connections team, in that enablement of an environment in which somebody can meet Jesus in a little or in a big moment, you will have the opportunity to sign up. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucia. Can you guys thank Lucia? I don't know if it was captured in what Colleen shared, but the fall and the summer were very difficult for us. And it felt like God had brought Lucia into our lives for this conversation. Her and I met in a Starbucks over off Ryan Road. That's like her Starbucks, if you don't know that one. And I don't remember why we were meeting, but the conversation was like 2 hours long, and it felt like God really brought that together. And that led to a lot of really great discussions. And the thing that I want us to understand this morning as a church, as we look towards the future, is that in the past, we've said it's about tasks. It's about opening the door. It's about running the audio. It's about singing. It's about getting all the jobs done so that we can have church in the morning. And the reality is, it's not about the tasks. The tasks are more or less just the things that we do, but it's a bigger picture than that. It's about loving God and loving people and doing that each and every day, whether it's a Sunday morning or a Monday afternoon or a Saturday or whatever it is. And so as a church, we want to be more alive and more engaged, not just on Sundays, but where we are. The reality is, just to give you a picture of like who we are as a church, in our database, there's 175 people that would say like 1128 is my church. There's not 175 people here this morning. If you look around, it's much smaller than that. Our average attendance on a Sunday is about 105 people. And if you look around again, Vision Sunday, we didn't have 105 people. Maybe if we add in kids, we get a little bit closer to that. The reality is, like, if we're going to step into all that God has for us, we need to have some momentum. We need to build on the things that God has already done. And we need to move into the future and talk about what it is that God's going to do. If you were here with us in the fall, you probably remember Here, Near, and Far. Anybody remember we talked about Here, Near, and Far? And we said this is our year-end Above and Beyond campaign with a goal of raising $60,000 above and beyond like our budgeted number so that we could set money aside for a future building, so that we could develop partnerships in Milwaukee and Racine counties, and so that we could start a relationship with Esperanza Viva, a school in Mexico, an orphanage in Mexico, where we could send dollars there and help fund 3 kids living and schooling and eating and all those kinds of things. And eventually we'd wanted to see those things expand. And to give you an update of where that landed, we have been able to hit that goal. The reason we hit that goal is because our budget, we didn't actually spend as much money last year as we thought we were going to spend or that we had planned. And so we were able to hit the $60,000 goal, and this year we've already put the $40,000. Yeah, that's something to celebrate. We put that money aside so that when a building opportunity presents itself, that we'll be able to have something to get started with. We've developed the relationships with City on a Hill and the Family Connect Care Portal, and there's money now every single month budgeted to go to them or to meet local tangible needs here in Oak Creek. And that's a budgeted dollar amount of $6,000 a year with room to grow. There's an additional $6,000 a year that's set aside for church planting and starting new churches. And in a couple of weeks, you'll get to hear from Troy Cotton Jr., who's our church planter in residence at Lake Point, and he's starting a church up on the north side off of Good Hope Rope in the future. And so, like, there's $12,000 that we're just going to be giving away in the next couple of months here to benefit the local community, the nearby communities, and then the $4,000 a year that we're going to be sending towards Esperanza Viva in Mexico. And so it's a really exciting thing to look at how the year ended and to say, okay, God, like, you gave us this vision, you gave us this dream, and how are you going to bring those things to life? And Colleen mentioned our first ever series, and it was this people group that were escaping slavery in Egypt. And we said, are we there yet? And I find that, like, we're kind of like still these wanderers in some ways, right? Like, we normally meet at the high school, but today we are here in the middle school. Like, we literally are wanderers around Oak Creek. We meet wherever there's an open space. And so, like, as we wander and as we start to say, well, like, what's next? Colleen and I were reading in Exodus the last couple weeks, and I found that in chapter 35 of Exodus, Moses, he comes down from the mountaintop and he's like, hey, here's what we're going to do. Here's the vision that God's given me. And so he says in verse 4, Moses said to the whole Israelite community, this is what the Lord has commanded. From what you have, take an offering for the Lord. Everyone who is willing is to bring to the Lord an offering of gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and other types of durable leather, acacia wood, olive oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and from the fragrant incense, and onyx stones and other gems to be mounted on the ephod and breastpiece. All who are skilled among you are to come and make everything the Lord has commanded. The tabernacle with its tent and its covering, clasps and frames, crossbars, posts and bases, the ark with its poles and the atonement cover and the curtain that shields it, the table with its poles and all its articles and the bread of the presence, the lampstand that is for light with its accessories, lamps and oil for the light, the altar of incense with its poles and anointing oil and the fragrant incense, the curtain for the doorway at the entrance to the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering with its bronze grating, its poles and all its utensils, the bronze basin with its stand, the curtains of courtyard with its posts and bases, and the curtain for the entrance to the courtyard, the tent pegs for the tabernacle and for the courtyard, and their ropes, the woven garments worn for ministering in the sanctuary, both the sacred garments for Aaron the priest and the garments for his sons when they serve as priests. They were given a vision for building a future, for building the tabernacle, the place that God would meet with them. And there's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of instruction. There's a lot of this is what we have to do. And they respond, the whole Israelite community. They withdrew from Moses' presence, and everyone who was willing and whose heart was moved then came and brought an offering to the Lord for the work on the tent of meeting, for all its service and for the sacred garments. All who were willing, men and women alike, came and brought gold jewelry of all kinds, brooches, earrings, rings, and ornaments. They all presented their gold as a wave of offering to the Lord. Everyone who had blue, purple, or scarlet yarn and fine linen or goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and the other durable leather brought them. Those presenting an offering of silver or bronze brought it as an offering to the Lord, and everyone who had acacia wood, because that was, accessible, anyone who had that for any part of the work, they brought it. Now you're probably wondering, why are we reading about what they're building? What the heck does this look like for 1128? What stands out to me and Colleen, just as we read through this over the last couple of weeks, is that Moses had a vision. He met with God, and God gave him a vision and said, do this. Move forward towards this. And in the wilderness where they were wandering, where they didn't necessarily have a home, God had already given them everything they need to step into the future, to be able to do the things that God was asking them to do. And when I think about our church, when I think about where we are, when I think about the fact that there are Sundays when we have to step out of the high school and go to the middle school, or we step out of the high school and we go to a park or the Milwaukee yard, it feels like we're wanderers. But the reality is, as God invites us into the future, God has already given us, a church, everything that we need to step into the future that he's inviting us towards. Now, in the past, before these conversations with Lucia, Colleen and I, we felt like, man, we don't have what we need. We can't do this on our own. We felt the burden of man, how are we going to do this? And with Lucia's helpful conversations, we're now in this headspace of no, we are the church. We are 1128. We dream together. We go together. God has given us a vision that together we will step into more fully. And we have everything we need. You have something that's needed to move the vision ahead, to move the church ahead, to help us move into that space, to deepen relationships in Milwaukee and Racine counties, to deepen partnerships in Mexico with the orphanage. You have something that God has given you that you can offer up to move this church ahead. The reality is, a church of 100 people on a Sunday or 175 people that call this place home that aren't here regularly is not a church that's sustainable for a building long term. We had lunch, Dan and I had lunch with a guy earlier this week who was saying, like, you got to be a church of about 200 people on a weekend, 400 people in your database before you can really sustain moving into a building. And so as we look ahead to the future, it starts with three really kind of simple things that we can maybe do, that we can bring forward to help us become the church that's ready and prepared to move into the building. The first one is to engage. Engage. It's really not as hard as we think it is. It's pretty simple, but it's about attendance. It's about social media shares. It's about personal invitations. When we engage with our church, it means that we're here. People want to be a part of something that has momentum, that has energy. And when all of us are together on a regular basis, the community deepens, the connection deepens, and people that are new, they come in and they're like, oh, this is a great place. There's a lot of energy and connection, and I want to be a part of this community. And so I'm asking you, is that something that you can offer up? A regular connection, a regular engagement here at 1128. We're going to pass out some things here in just a minute where you can respond and just make a commitment to what that looks like for you. And it might be, I don't know if I can do that. And if that's you, that's totally fine. It's helpful for us to know where you're at. You might say, I'm going to be here one Sunday a month. There's no judgment. You might say, I'm here 2 to 3 Sundays a month, or count on seeing me every single week. Like, I'm ready to engage. When you're thinking about your attendance, what does that look like? When you think about social shares, are you the person on social media, aside from Jared, because he doesn't believe in social media use, that's like, I'm going to share all of the 1128 posts? Are you the person that's going to say, hey, there's this event going on, come with me to it? When it comes to personal invites, are you going to invite your friends, your neighbors to be a part of this church because this church means something to you? When we step into the future, it's because we are offering up our engagement on a regular basis. And we're excited to invite people into it with us. The second thing that you can do, that you might be able to offer up, is to bring your connection. That's a little different than engagement. Connection is what Lucia is talking about. This is the connections team. We used to call everybody that was a part of like our teams a volunteer, but now we're part of the connections team. And honestly, you might say like, I'm already connected. I'm already on a team in some way. And you might say, like, I want to be on a different team. I'm tired of doing the door, or I'm tired of doing this. And let us know if that's you. And if you're not on a team, if you haven't been a part of the connections team, this is your chance to say, like, hey, I'm in. I'm in. And you can count on me one Sunday a month, or 2 to 3 Sundays a month, or I'm going to be there every week, and I would love to be a part of this connections team. I want to champion the church on Sunday mornings or at events or whatever it might be. You might be able to step in and offer up your connection and helping us really help people connect with us as a church more deeply. Maybe that's something that you can bring. And then the last thing is generosity. And we don't talk about generosity much at 1128 because we realize that especially in terms of money, it can be like a thing that's uncomfortable. It could be a thing that has caused hurt or pain or mistrust between you and the church in the past. And so we are really careful not to talk about it in a way that's going to upset you. But there's some facts about giving and generosity that are from the Bible that I would encourage you to figure out and learn and to really pray to God, like, help me understand what it looks like to trust you with my money. When it comes to 1128, the reality is that our budget every year is $177,000. And that barely covers us being able to rent a school space, to have an office space, and to do the other things that we do. And there's some people that give way above and beyond, and there's other people that give what they can, and that's $10 a week or $5 a week or whatever that is. But if we're going to become the church in the future that we really think God is inviting us to be, more connected in Oak Creek, having a permanent home where we can minister and care and help people heal, dollars have to be reflected. If we're going to be a church that's better partner to ministries and nonprofits and organizations in Milwaukee and Racine counties, dollars have to continue to increase. If we're going to be a better partner to Esperanza Viva in Mexico, our dollars have to increase. And I believe that God has given us what we need as a church to be able to do those things. And so the question this morning, just the third thing, as you think about generosity, as you ask God, like, what are you really asking me to do? There's a very specific kind of roadmap that we outlined in Here, Near, and Far. And if you missed that, I'd encourage you to go back to our website and check that out. But if you're like, I don't know what giving looks like at 1128, on this sheet that's going to come around right now, just check that in, and that's fine. But maybe you have a different idea, and maybe you need to pray about that. That would be the honest thing to do. That would be the best case thing to do. But there's 5 types of givers. The first is the giver that's saying, I'm going to give something when I can. When I'm here, I'm going to do what I can. When I'm there on a Sunday, I'm going to remember to give something to the church because I believe in this church. I believe that it's going to do something good. I believe that it's on mission with God. The second type is I'm going to give regularly. I really believe in it so much that even when I'm not there, I'm going to set up my gift so that it comes in and it helps move the mission and the vision forward. And then there's the really big step that is hard for a lot of us to take, and myself and Colleen included in this. It's moving from I'm going to give regularly to I'm going to become a tither. A tither in the Bible is somebody that brings their first and their best to God. Ultimately, in Scripture, in the Old Testament, that's a 10%. And that's kind of a reference point for most churches these days of the tithers, somebody that's giving 10%. And if you think about what 10% might look like, if you make $50,000 a year, that means that $5,000 of that you're giving back to the church. And I'd encourage you to pray about what that looks like, and if God's asking you to become a tither, and what that percentage looks like, and how you're going to make that happen here. Beyond that is the person or the family that's saying, I'm surrendered. Like, my money is not my own, and I recognize that, and I honor that, and God has blessed me so that I can give it back. And I'm going to surrender, and I'm going to give above and beyond, because this is what God's asking me to do. Maybe that's you. And then there's the visionary giver that's like, I'm here, I'm all in, I want to make big things happen. God's given me an abundance of dollars, and I want to be able to spend that on the church and help the church fund buildings and missions and orphanages and other places in Milwaukee and Racine County. There's 3 things that we've been given. We've been given the gift of engagement, of connection, and of generosity. And when I think about the people that were wandering and where they were and this vision that Moses had, and that they all left and they went and found what they had and they brought it back, they had everything that they needed. God's given us a vision to be a church that's got a permanent home in Oak Creek, that's connected to nonprofits and ministries that are making a real difference in Milwaukee and Racine counties. He's given us a vision for the faraway places in Mexico where there's an orphanage, Esperanza Viva, where we can support children that are coming from horrible situations. And when we hear this vision, we go back and we look and we see that God's already given us everything we need to step into that. And so my encouragement, my ask of you this morning is look at this and consider your response to this. Pray about that. Ask God what it is that He's asking you to do, because we all have a part to play. God has provided everything, and what are we going to bring forward? What are you going to bring forward to move 1128 into the future, into the vision that God's given this church, not Mike and Colleen, but given the church to be a difference-making church in Oak Creek, Milwaukee, Racine counties, and Mexico as a starting place? I know that we've been given enough, and I trust that. And I'm excited about the future that God has for us as a community. Would you pray with me? God, you've given us more than enough. You've given us resources. You've given us time. You've given us connections with friends and neighbors. And God, the thing that stands out to me is that you stirred in the hearts of the people of Israel. You stirred in their hearts and they responded. God, as we step into what's ahead, as we trust you for the big vision, as we trust you to enable us to have a permanent space, as we look to grow and become a church that's double in size over the next couple of years, as we look to take bold risks, would you allow us to take bold risks personally? Would we trust you in ways that are uncomfortable? Would we be okay being uncomfortable? God, you've given everything that we need to this community. We pray for those that aren't with us this morning. We pray that they would hear this vision for the future, that they would respond to the ask as well, and that we'd be able to step fully into what's ahead. Excited about what it is you're going to do in this church, in these communities, in the places that we're connected to. God, we cannot do anything alone. And so we do all this trusting that you will continue to provide, that you will continue to sustain us, and you'll continue to guide our steps. God, we thank you for the opportunity to partner with you, to make the kind of difference that you're inviting us to make. We pray this in your name. Amen.